Okay, so today I'm going to call this a very special episode. I have one of my good friends with me, Sylvia. We've known each other for a while. We've co-facilitated um, gender dysphoria support group for lesbians and bisexual women. Um, we've done a lot together, and it's been a joy. Anyway, so we're going to have a conversation today about true trans. And the point of this conversation is for us is we're going to kind of be putting forth our case, um, our ideas and our thoughts around the idea of true trans. And we're going to, in my opinion, I want to kind of debunk this idea of a true trans or a true transsexual or a true transgender person. So with that said, we're going to jump off with Sylvia is going to go ahead and start talking about some of her points that she wants to talk about, her notes, because she, before I hit record, she started telling me all these things. I'm like, wait, we got to record now. So now it's your time to go. Go.
It's so hard for me to just like give a quick synopsis without just pulling out the entire soapbox and standing up and like, all right. um, so to start over, when people ask me, well, do you believe that there are true transsexuals or true trans people? And I'm like, well, I believe that there is a true trans person in the sense that there are people who live with an extreme discomfort, and someone could say a crippling discomfort as their biological sex and being perceived by outsiders as their biological sex. And these people then go and pursue procedures and cosmetic medical interventions to try to mimic the opposite sex and be perceived as if they are the opposite sex by everyone. Though there are people like that who exist and who do that. They could be called true trans. However, I feel that there's way too many exceptions to that rule and just makes it a moot point, because there are plenty of people who get mistaken for the opposite sex every day or most of the time. Right. um, and you're not trying to. You don't,
No.
so then so, but does that make you transsexual if you're not trying to? No. Okay. So it's like, so someone who's truly trans is someone who undergoes things to really try to pass as the opposite sex and who are happy with the results of it. Which, they don't have any regrets about their transitioning. Some have said, oh, I'm cured. It cured my dysphoria. And I say happy and I say cured because for me, if someone is truly happy now in their body or their dysphoria has been cured, they should be comfortable to admit, oh, I am actually a woman. I'm just a man. That would be curing the dysphoria, to say, I'm comfortable just not doing anything to my body anymore, and being just my natural occurring self and living my life. And I'm cured and I am happy with myself. But when people say, oh, no, I'm happy with my transition, you have to wake up every day. And the first thing you do is running away from the acknowledgement that you are a woman, or running away from the acknowledgement that you are a man. That's the first thing you do when you wake up and you see yourself in the mirror, to be like, okay, I'm transgender, I'm transsexual. Like I have to take my hormones. I, am not going to speak out loud. I'm a woman. This is what a woman looks like, or I'm a man.
Yeah.
This is what men look like. So
The part about the hormones is a good point because that's some of the misunderstanding I think most people have is this idea that there is this transition and then you are done, and you're never done. Like you have to always take the
you're always
opposite sex
maintaining the
hormones.
facade. Yeah.
If you stop and you still have your original if you still have your ovaries or your testicles, your body is going to revert back, and you're going to, appear more male and female again because, the hormones is going to dictate that. So it is an ongoing process. It never stops. So
Right.
it is an action that is constantly having to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can concede that there are people who undergo the transition process taking hormones, getting surgeries to remove body parts or add body parts, and who do not correct people or don't, are happy assimilating into society conspicuously as the opposite sex. But I've been finding that anytime someone who passes really well does something really shitty, the first response is, well, they're not really trans. They're not a true transsexual. And I'm like, well, then they're happy with their transition. They're trying really hard to pass. What else? What
Well,
else is there?
this gets into the whole issue that I think exists and that I have with the whole idea of transgender or transsexual or transgender ideology, if you want to refer to it as that, is definitions.
Mm.
Definitions are not clearly defined, and especially more recently, definitions have really been just obliterated to mean whatever that individual wants them to mean, could be based on their feelings, which is not the way language works. If it worked that way, we wouldn't have language and society would be in complete chaos. Because we
Well,
have to agree that when I say that's the lamp, you also understand that's a lamp, so we can both convey to each other,
right.
look at that particular thing, right?
Mm.
I can't call it a lamp and you call it a cup. That's going to
Right.
fall, everything's going to fall apart.
Okay, so I'm glad you said this because I feel like there are certain major voices in the transgender movement that might say something like, I'm a biological female living as a man, or I'm a biological, I'm a biological woman. I'm a female, but I'm living as a man. I live my life as,
Yeah. And what does that mean?
right. And I'm like, okay, well, my definition of man is adult human male. So by my definition of man, you're not living as a man.
Yeah.
And trans man is just another word for woman. So I'll just say woman. Like I don't understand why I'm being expected to adopt this idea that you are somehow close to the opposite sex when my mama raised me not to lie. So if I see a woman, I'm not gonna be like, okay, I don't see you as a woman. That's
Yeah.
wrong. Um,
Um, okay, so I wanted to that brings up the interesting point about the lying part. In my opinion, it is a lie. You are lying to yourself. You are a
right.
transition, in my opinion, is a bandage and not a cure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure I did. I fully admit that there were aspects to my transition that did make me feel better, right? But understanding why it made me feel better then actually led to actual true, like, healing from it. And I like to use healing instead of cure because I don't really believe that most stuff, especially when it comes to mental health, is cured. It's more like you heal from it, you manage it, but it's always kind of there. Um, yeah,
Keep going. You just remind me of a point. I don't want to forget it.
get your pen out.
Yeah.
Um, so the lie. Now, so one of the arguments I hear people say is, well, adults should be able to live their life however they want. And I agree. Adults should be able to live the life however they want. But like, is that really the way we run society? Do we truly let every adult live their life completely the way they want? No, because adults don't live on islands by themselves. They live in a society and they have to come in contact with other people, a society that has structure and rules, right? So a person who transitions then is lying and then lying to everybody else, and then is expecting to other people to also participate in the lie. And that's where I take a lot of issue with it. You are requiring other people to participate in your belief about yourself. How is that fair? Who wins in that issue? Like, and I think this is why the transgender, like, transgender advocates and lobbies and political groups and stuff have really built up this idea that they are the most oppressed, right? So that they are the most oppressed, so they are the people that everybody should be catering to. But when it comes right down to it, we're all on pretty equal ground about our own feelings, right?
Mm.
And so whose feelings win out in this? I don't
Mm.
want to be forced to lie. I don't want to be forced to share spaces with males. I'm sure
Right.
there's men who don't want to share spaces with women, in locker rooms and stuff like that. So like, why do our feelings not matter, but yours matters?
Right. Um, so the first definition of true trans I gave is my concept of there being a true trans. But what I think there's another idea of true trans being that gender dysphoria trademark
Yeah.
is a condition like ADHD, OCD, anorexia that, that someone can be born with, maybe, or maybe they develop it. They don't know, but it's its own condition rather than a set of symptoms that all create this desire
Well,
to transition.
well, now ADHD and stuff like that, you could say people are probably born with it because there is an actual it's brain stuff happening there. Like you can do,
Right.
but eating disorder probably not. Eating disorder
Mm.
is developed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
That's true. That's true.
but
Fair.
they're all like neurological or mental health kind of conditions,
Right. I
conditions
guess.
of the mind. Or
Yes.
well, no, ADHD is an actual physical one. But anyways,
Well, so
autism, things like that.
not I'm no I'm no brain scientist. I'm no neurologist, okay? But I find the concept of having a female brain in a male body or having a male brain in a female body extremely offensive and
Yeah.
sexist.
Yeah.
Because what they're essentially saying is if you have a lady brain, then you're a woman. And they're not saying that, but that's essentially what they are saying,
Yeah.
and the science backs it up. Females have a bigger amygdala. And I'm like, okay, we we don't have a conclusive conclusion about what this means. We have data that shows us, okay, in most female, I don't I'm pulling this out of my ass, but this is an example. Okay. I think I read this somewhere, maybe. Okay, that female brains have a bigger amygdala on average,
Yeah.
male
Yeah.
brains, right? And therefore women are inherently emotional and men are
Oh,
logical, blah, 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 blah. But I'm like, look, you're coming up with the conclusion that women are more emotional from the data of there's a bigger amygdala. For all we know, a bigger amygdala actually might make women more logical. And, because I'm like, if men will shoot someone over a road rage incident. If that's not thinking illogically and with your emotions, I don't know what
mm-hmm.
is. And that's with a fucking small, excuse me, amygdala.
Yeah.
So anyway, this idea that someone can have a brain that is not supposed to be in their current body, I find absurd. And I have not been exposed to data that gives any sort of conclusion close to that.
Yeah. So this is an excellent jumping off point. Before we
Okay.
go any further, I want to recommend this book. You read this book, right, Sylvia?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Trans by Helen Joyce. This is an excellent book that's written simply to the point, but the research is there. She cites it. You can look it up yourself. When I read this, I was really, really happy with how she put it in very plain, understandable English
So easy to read.
for someone to just get it, right? Because I had already looked into a lot of his stuff on my own and did research. Because, when I came out of this, I was left with a lot of questions. And, for people who don't know me personally, I will say that I am really not the type of person to go off of just emotions. I try to be logical. I really am interested in facts. I really am interested in where's the proof, especially after this, especially after believing this stuff and coming out of it. I really have been very guarded about if I'm going to state an opinion, if I'm going to have a belief, I want to back that belief up with some goddamn facts. With some
Yeah.
proof. I don't want to just say, well, I feel this way, therefore this is my opinion. So know that as we're talking here, this is stuff I have researched, I have looked at, I have read books, I have gone. By the way, if you want to find out any of this information, just go to the transgender website sources and read what they say about where the idea of transgender came from, where transsexuals came from, how long they've been around, all their history with a critical eye. And then follow the names they throw out, like Harry Benjamin. Go research Harry Benjamin. Okay. Magnus Hirschfeld. Go research Magnus Hirschfeld. Karl Heinrich Ulrich. Go research that dude. Gay man. Very okay. So this one is very interesting. He is kind of one of the first to come up with this idea. In like, let's see, what year would it have been? It 18, I would think it was around 1860 something. Or he came up with the idea. He was a gay man who came up with the idea that gay people really are a third sex.
Yeah.
That is basically like not female or male. They're like this other thing, or like gay men have the brain of a woman. Really, this idea of gay men having the brain of a woman kind of came. I'm sure he's not the first one to think of that, but he was the first one to really like put it out there and, quote unquote, study it and talk about it and write about it. And so, he was one of the earliest ones. And then came along Magnus and Harry, and Harry came after Magnus. But there is a whole background of a belief system behind the belief system in people being trans or transsexual.
Transgenderism is the original gay conversion therapy, and people don't understand the history.
I do believe that. When you look at the history of it, I absolutely believe
It's
that.
right
And
there.
it is very plainly to see. Just go look at it.
So it's the original gay conversion therapy, and it's also some rich straight men's fetish.
Well, yeah, there is now. Yes, there is the fetish aspect to it. It's always been there. It's always been there.
With, I would say, with the dysphoria,
yeah,
aspect. Going back to, sorry, well, I don't want to cut off your plug for trans.
My tangent. No, I just trans is a good one to go read, to get this information, to get you started if you really want to do the research, right? Yeah. But what you had said earlier about, these ideas kind of going back, or like, this putting, when talking about the brain science, where do you split off what the social, what the society believes already, the bias that society already believes about women and men, from the science? Like science, whether we would like to admit it or not, is not unbiased.
Right.
It can be, but people aren't. So that people are the flaw in the system oftentimes, and it's very hard to kind of break those two apart. So to sum this little thing up, if you go back in the past and you look up these dudes who founded the idea of transgenderism, transsexualism, all of their beliefs come from misogyny, homophobia, and for the gay folks, also internalize homophobia and misogyny. Because, this Karl Ulrich guy, he was a gay dude, but like he thought that he had a woman's brain. But you can understand, like, people are trying to make sense of something, and and this was back in 18 something other, so like
it's a human instinct to want to survive and to want to fit in. So
and to understand, like, you want to understand why you're different. So like, I do not fault like him for coming up with these ideas. Probably made a lot of sense to him in the time, and actually helped him to kind of feel better and maybe excuse gay people, right? Because like, no, we can't help it, dude, we have the brain of a woman. And
right.
But
how tragic, but like, we deserve happiness. And
but the thing is now we're now, right?
And now gay men need to get over the internalized homophobia and love themselves as a feminine, flamboyant, effeminate homosexual male.
And butch lesbians need to do the same.
And butch lesbian needs to do the same. I was thinking of particular. There's a YouTuber.
Okay. Yeah. So the thing is with what we believe now about transgender, and it is an ideology, it's a belief system. So transgender ideology is an ideology that comes out of like something from 200 years ago. We shouldn't still be believing something from 200 damn years ago, right? Like
And
we should be, we're
I
in a
hear,
much different time.
every time I hear someone say, okay, but in other cultures, they have a third gender already. And
Oh
that
God.
interests me because, you know, I don't want to be
Yeah.
Eurocentric. So I go and I
Yeah.
research it, and I find every single time that I have researched it, it is homosexual men
Yeah.
that are granted this third space, and they're
Yep.
granted the freedom to express themselves, you know, and, you know, occasionally
But
a
under the
lesbian.
guise of being a third, right? They can't be men. They're not real men. It's still homophobic.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, if you listen to people in modern, you know, a lot of like Native American or the Maori,
Buffafini.
Safafini. Yeah, I butchered the Maori. Uh, I've heard some of them say, "Can you not use us as a cultural pawn because you're getting it wrong
Yeah.
and you have
Yeah.
no idea what you're talking about." Um, so anyway, I think you're right that the ideology of gender or trans, so people say transgender ideology, I say gender ideology, which brings us, you had wanted to say in your text to me about talking about the good trans.
Oh yeah.
So, you
Yeah.
know, so we have the true transsexuals
Yeah.
who are the good kind, who are against gender ideology.
Yeah.
Um, and that is,
Me and you both take issue with that.
yeah,
Right. And I recently did a thing about Buck Angel. And so this conversation we're having now is a little bit follow up to that because that got me that I expressed my opinions on that. I put some evidence there, got me thinking. Me and you share the same thing. So we're like, hey, let's talk about this. So
yeah.
share your perspective.
Uh, it's just, it's fascinating to me. The the cognitive dissonance. So and maybe I have a personal stake in this. Ooh, lighting's changed. Beautiful sunset.
The sun does that. It moves. If you feel that that's true for you, if you feel like the sun doesn't move, then it doesn't for you.
It's a little phobic right now, to be honest. It needs to check its privilege.
It's
Um,
not respecting your belief system around it.
I identify being not overexposed. Okay. I feel like maybe there's a part of me that takes a particular, like, it stings a little bit when I hear like a good transgender transsexual, you know, be like, well, this is different than non-binary, like I'm not, you know, totally different. And I'm like, okay, as someone who was gender fluid for 3.5 years, I'm like, well, first of all, when I was identifying as gender queer, gender fluid, it wasn't something I didn't decide one day. I learned online that that's what I was. So I was like, oh, okay, someone who dresses like me, someone who acts like me. There's a term for that. Okay, I didn't realize that. I guess I'm freaking gender fluid. Um, I don't why I believed it. I was young and impressionable, and at a liberal arts college. What can you do?
Also,
Um,
you do struggle with gender dysphoria yourself.
well,
We both have an experience with that,
right,
right? So that's why
right.
we
I do.
work together.
Yes, thank you. That was the biggest impetus of me trying to research what was going on and why I wanted to cut off body parts. But so for me, transitioning was not on the cards for me for a number of reasons, but I still struggled with this with the clinical definition of gender dysphoria. I fit it. I checked off all of them, or
Yeah.
almost all of them, except, you know, and I could think back to when I was a kid and, like, you know, being really upset when I learned that my voice wasn't going to get super low like my dad's, like very upset by that. And, you know, dressing up in his clothes and being like, I'm a daddy, 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 you know, like I did that. I would walk it. um, you know, I remember when I was like 8, I got what would be called gender euphoria when someone mistook me for a boy, because that rarely happens. But when it did, I was like, so it's like, okay, I fit this definition. I didn't transition. I want to find a way to accept my body as it is and learn how to function while experiencing this discomfort at being a woman. And I'm going on, this is off the tangent of what is a good trans. That was more my gripe about people shitting on non-binary people. It's like, I get it. But
No,
no, so,
like, yeah, you're not, your belief isn't any better just because what you take it further. Like,
right, you take it the next step, but like,
yeah,
um, exactly,
you're still believing this idea,
right,
right? This philosophy that you are not really the sex you are because you feel a different way.
right.
Whatever that means. Again, what does any of this mean?
And so then it's like, okay, well, if you can acknowledge, well, I know that I'm not changing my sex. I just want to live as the opposite sex. Okay, do that. But why are you using the opposite sex spaces? Why are you requiring other people to call you by opposite sex pronouns? Your happiness is dependent on other people's participation in this desire you have. And also, if you do have this, intense desire to transition because of your gender dysphoria being a mental problem,
Yeah.
why are we curing or helping this mental problem with a physical change to the body? The
Yeah,
example
that
people always give is, you wouldn't give an anorexic person liposuction because in their head they're obese. You say no, just it's the modern day lobotomy. Um,
yeah. Oh yeah,
oh,
that's another one people should look into. The whole lobotomy thing was very interesting. Um,
it's a
now
parallel of
the
lobotomy.
parallels with the lobotomy that I found very interesting was that first of all, there wasn't much science behind it at all. It did work for some people because if somebody is like really mentally ill or has some kind of major neurological issue, like maybe they're mentally ill where they're like, you know, schizophrenic, maybe they're like lashing out, maybe they're being aggressive, like who knows, like maybe just acting crazy, and you puncture their brain and they stop, you did get a result. Like,
Right.
you guess
That is a result.
I guess you could say it helped. And I actually read that there was some people who really did say that it cured their depression or something, right? The thing is, there was also a ton of people that it maimed, that there's some people died from it. Some people just became complete vegetables. Like, this was, but it was touted as a medical marvel. It was touted as an actual medical scientific procedure. And one dude came up with this and like spread it everywhere, and it spread. Everybody found out about it through media. And so then people started flocking to this guy, right? To be helped. And when it started to get rolled back by the medical community, finally, when they realized, oh shit, this is actually not doing so great, and there's really no proof that this is legit, there was people that actually started to like protest and throw fits about the fact that they wanted this procedure done. They were adults consenting to want this procedure done. The medical community should give them this procedure, this
Damn it, our
life-saving procedure.
insurance plan should pay for it
So
too.
no, but it's the same. It's like very parallel with this idea of the person, the patient coming to the clinician, maybe a clinician that is not on the up and up. Harry Benjamin, look into him. He was a fucking quack. Um, coming to, a physician comes up with this procedure, and then these people all want the procedure. That doesn't mean the procedure is legit, ethical, or should be done.
Right.
And
And
you also
it should
shouldn't be mandating doctors to do this either. Again, we're violating, aren't you violating also other people's rights when you force them to do a procedure that is maiming or harming a healthy human?
yeah.
Like, how do you think some doctors, like I actually know one doctor I spoke to, was actually my endocrinologist. When I stopped T, she wanted to have a talk with me, and we talked for an hour. And let me tell you how amazing that is in the United States to have a doctor talk to you for an hour. But she was fascinated with this, and she was just like, you know what? I'm just an endocrinologist. I've just been doing what the mental health folks tell me to do, but I don't feel good about it. I see these young women coming in and wanting testosterone, and I know it's not good for them, and I don't feel good about it, but I'm told I have to do it. So you're requiring her to violate her ethical, her personal ethical boundaries. But not only that's a doctor's ethical thing, right? You're supposed to do no harm. You're supposed to like
Right.
not, and you're supposed to be science based.
Right. But the alternative is get your license revoked and never be able
Yeah.
to work again after you've
Yeah.
just spent how many decades studying your entire life to get to where you are.
And
And
she
you
works for a very woke healthcare provider here in California. So she
don't,
definitely would lose her ass.
yeah.
um, but yeah, that's, there is also, I want to mention this too. You could probably look it up and find it. Some guy was doing research on it, and I read about it. There's been lots of these medical things happening over the years. You go 200 years of medicine, of more modern medicine, there has been tons of this kind of stuff happening. There was one particular thing where there was this belief that you could cure women's mental health, mental illness and hysteria by giving them um, hysterectomies. And um, women were lining up to get these elective hysterectomies because they thought it would cure their mental health. Does this sound familiar?
They still literally
Well,
still
they still do that. I
quite
mean, that's what's
literally
happening.
still
That's
goes
what's
on.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
but again, you had patients, adults wanting this procedure done, demanding this procedure done, believing this procedure would save their lives, but it still was not ethical to do. And that's kind of the crux of like my main issue with this being a treatment and being a medical provided treatment.
Yeah.
There isn't the science behind it. And there's a whole ethical problem here with this. I don't give a shit if the person's adult. I don't care if they want it. Adults want lots of stuff that is not
There's
healthy or good for them.
there's a man I just watched on this YouTube channel called Soft White Underbelly. And this man is getting interviewed. He wants to like transform himself into a lizard. He's
Mm.
he's cut his ears off, he's cut his nose off, his tongue is split, he has tattoos, he has horns put
Oh, I've
in.
seen him. Yeah, yeah.
He is something to look at, you know. I think yeah, I don't know if he has teeth. He almost doesn't look human, but he is still human.
Yep.
He's still a human being with human rights, just like Buck Angel is still a woman. And the lizard man and Buck Angel both have done extreme body modifications, and are seemingly happy with their choices, which, okay, I'll take your word for it. But
But what if the person transitions and lives happily
oh,
for 20 years, but then suddenly they're not happy anymore?
right.
Did it not work? Do we have to
What?
wait till they die? Do we have to make sure that they never regretted? How do you know they didn't regret?
Right. They might not ever word it.
To know if someone regretted, they have to say it.
But at least with Lizard Man, I wish I knew his real name. Uh my insurance plan is not covering it. Tax dollars aren't paying for it. I don't have to participate in it.
True.
And
You're not,
and
yeah, he's not requiring you to call him Lizard Man and let him sleep in an aquarium somewhere.
right, if he was to go buy his own aquarium, go do, but he yeah,
And of course, you'll have people argue, that's totally different. And I want to know why. I
why?
want you to tell me an actual, and I would
Explain
love
it
to
to me
have the
like a
conversation.
man. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
they just get mad and walk away.
I'd love to have the conversation. You tell me how that's different.
Yeah.
Because there's the reality that this dude is just a human who is doing these radical um body modifications to appear other, for whatever reason. I mean, he could legit say that he has, species dysphoria, which actually in some circles is a real thing,
Yeah.
is a really believed thing.
Yep.
He really
Oh,
feels like he's a
Therian,
lizard.
right?
Huh?
Therian. It's when you have
There's a
like
couple of them. Blocked and Reported did a thing on it, was pretty good. So, maybe he feels like a lizard. Who are you to decide what his
what
identity
is
is,
the-
Um, just like, if that person feels like they aren't the sex that they are, who are you to decide that they're not?
right.
And they should be able to do whatever they want. And okay. But those are the same things. Tell me how they're different. But then, but like we pointed out, the next step is now you're requiring everybody to be on board with it. And that's different.
And
Different.
I have such mad respect for the men who have castrated themselves or who have gone to a doctor and got castrated, who get mistaken as a woman 98% of the time, unless people know them or can tell really well. I have mad respect for those men that still go to use the men's room or go to find a unisex, and respect that they are not a woman and they're not going to use a female space. Like, those are the alpha males, in my opinion,
Yeah.
Um, and those men, though, and usually, sometimes they consider themselves detransition, or sometimes they're like, yeah, I'm still taking the hormones because what else can I do?
Yeah.
You
But I know of one particular, I won't name him, but he does express that he does regret, he wishes he could undo it, but he can't. He
right.
is older now. He's been doing this. He's been in transition for years. At this point, he's just going to stay there. And it makes sense, but he's also not like lying about it.
Yeah.
He's pretty open about his situation.
Yeah. And I find that the people who have truly healed from dysphoria, or and I say healed with an asterisk, but like who've truly overcome, they're able to say, yeah, no, I'm a man who has no more penis and who took a shit ton of estrogen. This is what a man looks like when they've done that. And same with the women, um and all of those people throw a massive wrench in the true trans, good trans um dichotomy, or not dichotomy, paradigm, I think.
Okay, so real quick, so let's talk about the gender dysphoria aspect, because that is something that's thrown out a lot. Well, this person has gender dysphoria. Oh, that's terrible. Like, my impression of when people talk about gender dysphoria, they tend to like have this weird category that I don't think exists. Like, there's one woman who was talking about how she had gender dysphoria, but then she realized it was just from misogyny, and so it wasn't real gender dysphoria. And I'm like, wait a minute, how was that not real gender dysphoria? So what I'm led to believe is, what I'm hearing is, true gender dysphoria is gender dysphoria that just exists
Right.
out of nowhere.
Right.
The
And I disagree with that
But
straight
I
up.
do too. The problem is, if you back up and logic through that a little bit, gender dysphoria at its core is a severe uncomfortability with your biological sex and the desire to change it. Okay. Does it make biological, logical, scientific sense that people would be born hating their sex and wanting to change their sex? And if they were, what is the statistics of that? That would probably be a very low statistic, because already homosexuality is a pretty low statistic. Not many people are homosexual, and it's been pretty consistent as long as we've been kind of tracking it, right? Like, I think like about 3% of the population, and it tracks across culture. So like, if you're born transsexual, which means you're born with this innate gender dysphoria, that's the thing I think people think it is. How likely is that going to be? Okay, so let's say it is real. Let's go there. Let's say people are born with innate gender dysphoria. Is medical transition still the most ethical and good treatment for them?
Yeah.
If it is a condition, it exists in the mind, it does. Wouldn't it be better to try to help them integrate the mind is flexible. The brain is plastic. It is flexible even into adulthood. People have this idea in science fucking throws this shit out too, sometimes science, that like, oh, your brain's plastic at this age, but then it's not at this age. That's untrue. It's pretty much plastic the whole way through your life. So you can, you can change a lot of things. You can mold a lot of things. You can have different perspectives. You can heal from a lot of mental illness and mental health stuff, right? So why not are we not putting that work into helping these people integrate into the bodies they have? Like, why would you want to like cut healthy body parts off and make people lifelong medical patients? And it's horrendous. Like, and also these fucking surgeries, I would really encourage people to go look these surgeries up for yourself and see exactly what it is they do. These are not magic surgeries. This is not Star Trek. These people are not jumping into a fucking little bubble and coming out a fucking female or a male. These are horrible surgeries. They really are.
It's Frankensteinian.
And their parts, their created genitalia, which it's not real genitalia at all. It's created. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like actual genitalia. These people are, their genitalia is being removed.
You can't create an entire organ.
No, we cannot create organs. None of them. Like we still do transplants, you know?
Yeah. I don't know that medically transitioning people is as far as like the Hippocratic oath goes for doctors, first do no harm. I don't know that the transgender procedures meet that standard.
Yeah.
And just like with the lobotomy, there were some people who were like, I had depression and it cured me.
Yeah.
So it worked for me. And it's like, I would love to be like, okay, what are the other repercussions of it?
Yeah. And why did it work?
Right.
Like, do we know exactly why it worked?
Right. Is it because you now can't remember?
Yeah. And just because it worked for you, that doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. And how do we decide who it's going to work for? Because that's one of the big things well, that's one of the things we like to think is our standard in modern medicine, is that's why we rely on actual, science that has been put through different trials with multiple people trying to reproduce the same results, so that we can be relatively sure that we understand that this is a particular treatment. This is how you identify the illness, right? Medical community is all about identify the illness so you know how to treat it. There's no way to identify gender dysphoria other than just the person telling you it.
Right. Right. And
okay. And again, gender dysphoria is so broad. Even if you narrow it down to a particular, even if you narrow it down to a severe discomfort with your sex, there is still tons of questions behind that. Why? Just start asking why. And I bet I have yet to hear a story from a trans individual, a trans person, doesn't matter who I've heard the story from. I've yet to hear a story from someone where I haven't been able to identify a pretty logical reason why they probably feel the way they do. Right. Even they'll deny it, but I'll be like, dude, come on, like
yeah.
So, okay, so the true transsexual thing. I'd really challenge somebody to come up with, or the true gender dysphoria. I'd really challenge someone to tell me what true gender dysphoria is. So I disagree with that. I think gender dysphoria is a mental health issue, and I think the vast majority of people who have gender dysphoria can be treated through mental health. That said, there are some mental illness it just cannot be treated. Like, we know that sometimes there is mental illness that medication doesn't work, therapy doesn't work. It just doesn't work for whatever reason. We don't know why. So
would that be considered true trans? If the talk therapy doesn't work?
Maybe. But again, though, it's still
when have you done enough to prove?
Yeah, I know. When have you done enough? And the other thing about therapy is, and medical and mental health takes you wanting to change. Mental health takes you wanting to do this action, right? If you don't want to face things, if you don't want to do these actions, no amount of therapy, no amount of medication, well, the medication will still probably help, but you have to take it, right? So if you refuse to take it, if you refuse to talk to the therapist about, things that are really in there that maybe the therapist trying to pull out of you and you lie about it, or you don't want to take it, or you leave that therapist because they're asking too hard of questions. If you don't want to participate in the process, you're not going to get better.
Right.
So I do wonder how many people, when they say, I went through 10 years of therapy and it didn't help me, I kind of wonder. I'm like,
Yeah. What did you talk?
maybe you really did try to get to your issues and you just cannot resolve them. If you cannot resolve your issues through like talk therapy or, psychoanalysis or medication, and you want to like cut body parts off,
Well, like
okay.
body integrity disorder, there are
Yeah, I
people
mean,
who are just
that's a
set on
very good
blinding
example.
themselves. They're like, no
Yeah.
doctor's going to blind them.
No,
So
they won't. And
I'll,
again, but see, that goes back, like I get accused of not of I get the thing that gets thrown at me a lot is, well, I believe when someone disagrees with me, well, I believe that adults should be able to do whatever they want. And I go, well, I didn't say that they shouldn't. I don't think there should be any law outlining an adult's wanting to go to a cosmetic surgeon and doing cosmetic procedures. I hate cosmetic procedures and I hate cosmetic surgeons. I think the whole cosmetic thing is horrible and shit, and I wish it would disappear. However, I would not advocate for a law that did away with it, because I do believe in the freedom of a person to fucking do what they want in a way, So like, no, a person is completely free to go do any cosmetic surgery they want, and that should include transition if they want to. But I do not believe it's a treatment, and I do not believe it should be
and
something that the medical community participates in.
and my question is, why do I have to entertain that title of being transsexual? They can call themselves that, but I mean, does it make me an asshole? Maybe, but I think it's kind of an asshole move to ask me to say they're transsexual, because to me, I'm like, that's offensive. It's a woman being a woman, doing what
Yeah.
women do, which is freaking try to survive, and
Yeah.
this woman went and got procedures done. So like, good for her. I'm glad
Okay,
she's
so this leads into another one I've heard, and I would like your take on this. Be nice.
mm,
The be nice thing gets thrown around a lot.
yeah.
Oh, I don't
Well,
want to be mean. I want to be nice. We should be accepting, like all this stuff. This is how do you address that?
the be nice, the be nice triggers me. Um, no,
Just so everybody knows, this is a huge trigger zone.
yeah,
So you will be triggered here. But we're adults, and so we can fucking manage that shit, right?
yeah.
Okay.
We
If you're
are
if you're too
emotionally
triggered,
capable.
you can fucking turn it off. That's how it works. Sorry, I just had to put that disclaimer in there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I so all as a little girl, I was always told be nice, and always be nice, be nice, be nice, especially, for the boys that would tease me, or boys who maybe had a crush on me, but I didn't like them back. I had to be nice.
Well,
And
boys, oh, you gotta be nice to the
be
boys.
nice to boys. He
Men are
likes
super
you.
sensitive. They're very sensitive
And
souls.
it's the same shit, different decade. And no, I'm actually going to assert my boundaries and stand up for myself. Um, and it's not mean for me to tell the truth.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's not mean for me to call a man, for me to call a woman. Um, will I be conscious of the fact that being called a woman is painful for some women? Sure, absolutely. I'm not going to go up to someone who is clearly trans identifying me like, hey, you're actually the sex that you were born as. And,
Yeah, like no,
what are you doing? Like but if I'm in a
that's
conversation,
that's just rude.
that's
I
just
mean,
rude. Um, yeah, the be nice is very, like, my question is, okay, be nice, who's being mean? Not me.
I think you hit on it though, because you said truth, right? Honesty can sometimes, I guess you could, honesty can be mean sometimes. When it comes to feelings, people's feelings are all over the place, right?
Wasn't that what the phrase tough love means?
Yeah. And also it's just one of those things where it's like, I am not going to be responsible for your feelings. I can't. Like, especially when it comes to like someone who is trans identified or really has these strong feelings about this particular thing that is really a big goddamn thing to like change. Like, whether you like it or not, our society is definitely divided along sex lines and boundaries, and they have existed for thousands of years and in Western culture have definitely existed in our culture for thousands of years. And our society is built around it. You can't just up in that for your feelings. Like, that's not the way it works. And like, again, whose feelings matter more, like, but the truth, it's the truth. Okay, that's something that I think gets rolled over too. I will continue to speak the truth. I'm sorry if you feel it's
Genuinely,
mean.
I am sorry
I
if
like
it.
I That sucks. That sucks that you cannot participate in the truth or the reality. And that's the other thing. There's a reality. And if you can't handle the reality of your situation, that is a you problem. It is not a me problem. It is not a her problem or a him problem or anybody else's problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And
And the be nice thing really is fucking like it really is a goddamn stick that women are beat with constantly. Women
oh,
get that shit way more than men do. When is the last time you ever heard a man get told to be nice? Unless it was his wife telling him to do so. Like, legit, like,
yeah,
men do not get told generally in our society. The pressure is not put on men and boys to be nice and spare feelings and care for others' feelings and emotional well-being. Women
right.
get that. So if you even take a hint of feminism in your life, if you're a woman and you approach the reality of your situation, you understand why this be nice thing is kind of bullshit, and you should
Right.
really be like, well, I'm sorry. Boundaries are boundaries, and if you find that mean, that's your problem, not mine.
Women's boundaries are not bigotry.
Yeah.
That's like my mantra. I'm like it, and I've had to tell myself that just for my own in my own personal relationships with men, that having my boundaries is not bigotry. They might get offended, they might get their feelings really hurt, but like you said, I'm not responsible for their reaction or their emotions about it. And you know, um it's just it's the parallels are fascinating.
So, um, yeah, so the be nice thing. And I understand that, like, if you have a close friend or you have a family member that is trans identified, like, if you want to respect their pronouns, if you want to lie for them, that's completely your prerogative, because you can lie for your family. Like, I get it. You can lie for your best friend. That's your choice. But like, don't expect everybody else to. And I
Right.
think the trans-identified person also needs to recognize that your family might lie for you, but the guy at the general store, he's not going to lie to your face, and that's not hate or bigotry. You're not
Oppressed.
hate crimed because the guy at the 7-Eleven fucking misgendered you. You're not being hate crimed because you're not allowed into a space that you are not allowed into because your sex is not the sex that's allowed there.
You're not, and I just wanted to push back on the you're not getting oppressed because someone misgendered you. You're not being oppressed or hate crimed because someone correctly sexed you. Like
Yeah.
the very concept of being misgendered, it's like that. That's not even a thing.
That is a bullshit concept.
Yeah.
Um, it's only legit if you actually, well, if you are missexed, which I get missexed often.
Right.
I get people who think I'm male. Um, but also not a new phenomenon for any gender nonconforming slash butch lesbian.
Right.
And I think even for some dudes that have long hair have also been
Yeah.
missexed, because That is how rigid the sex roles in our society is. Someone can legit get called the wrong sex based on the length of their hair. In a society this rigid, are you
Right.
not surprised that there are so many people who think or feel the opposite sex?
Right. Our society was built by literal Puritans that had like the strictest form of Christianity. The religious extremists from England came to this land, colonized it, and then built their own theocracy almost.
Yeah.
And we're seeing the repercussions of that even today.
And I know there's now there's a whole other side to the whole transsexual movement, and that side is, you know, the corporate entity, the money. And Jennifer Bielek has written extensively on that, and I think she's a really good source for that. Helen Joyce also goes into that in her book Trans. But like, this is not, I'm not talking about this today, because I do think that exists as well. But it's also interesting that, and this is where I disagree with Jennifer Bielek on this. She really thinks this is all just a corporate thing. It all comes from a corporate thing. And if you actually look at the history, you can see, going back to 18 something or other, these are ideas that were already percolating and happening in sex research and in some of these academic circles, right?
Mhm.
So this is also at a like social human level as well. But of course, if you throw enough money at anything, you can grow it. And that's what's happened. And it's been grown for nefarious reasons, I think. But there still is a base to this that we cannot ignore, because I think this particularly affects homosexuals.
Yeah, there's
You
a
know,
root, and the root or the seed, the impetus was, I think, homosexuals wanting to fit in, or not even not even homosexuals wanting to fit in, but other people trying to make homosexuals fit in to this rigid role, and um pathologizing homosexuality,
yeah.
and and saying you're
How much do you know about the old gatekeeping? Because this is another thing I hear. I hear some people saying, oh, well, back in the day, they actually were really good gatekeeping and didn't let people transition. If we could only go back to that great standard and model they had, everything would be fine. How much do you know about the old gatekeeping and standards?
I, there might be more to it, but I know that there was like you had to be living as the opposite gender for 2 years, and like seeing a professional therapist at least once a month for those 2 years. You had to be able to pass well, even without hormones or anything. Um,
Which I don't know exactly how that works.
right. How did they gauge that? Um, and yeah, there were other things that needed to be checked off, but that was it. And to their credit, that did stop a lot of these quote trans trenders, from
Well, yeah. I mean, if you strictly gatekeep something, you make people jump through a million goddamn hoops. Yeah, you're going to have less people willing to do that or want to go through all those hoops. Like, I get it. That still doesn't mean it was like correct.
right.
Like,
And
there was, yes, there was a lot of hoops to jump through. You they did, I will say that they did, I think they did screen a little more for other mental health issues. I'm
mhm,
not saying they didn't. But the issue, though, that I've always had with this idea that the old system was good and it worked, or it was better or something, is the idea that these clinicians still believed the base philosophy, right? They still believed that somebody had some kind of like mix match or wrong brain or right brain, wrong body, blah, 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 whatever. They still believed that this person was wrong in some way, and that medical intervention would help them. And like, that's where I'm taking issue. I take it with the base belief, with the base like idea.
right,
So these people still had medical transition on the table as a treatment.
right,
Again, with no proof. There was no more proof back then than there is now.
Right.
And something I found very interesting when I looked into some of the old kind of like protocols that they went by, especially I always forget his name, so I have to bring up my notes. Harry Benjamin. Okay, so especially Harry Benjamin, what one of his criteria was is the man had to act like a woman, carry himself as a woman. He had to be feminine, effeminate. Basically, Harry Benjamin's standard was homosexuals. A homosexual man who was effeminate was the true transsexual, according to Harry Benjamin. And the same went for women, because Harry Benjamin actually did transition a woman. One of the first was a woman, a lesbian woman. I would categorize her as butch because she was masculine presenting. Woman from the, I don't remember what year, it was very early, basically inherited her father's fortune. So she had a lot of money, and she was able to throw that money at Harry Benjamin to transition her. And he did. He gave her the cross-sex hormones, and I think she might have even had her breast removed, or some of the things that were done then. She did not actually live a more content, happy, or healthy life after transition. She died in her 60s of alcoholism after basically obliterating her family and everything she had around her. Which kind of gets to another argument that I find interesting, is this argument that when you transition, you then are healthier and happier and can live a normal life. But we see over and over again that that doesn't seem to be the case. But when you bring this up, they'll go, well, transition doesn't help everything. True. But if a person is not maintaining a basically like healthy standard, right? And then they transition and they're still not meeting any better healthy standard, and they're actually dropping below, which we see in some follow-up studies, then what exactly is it helping? Like, what's going on here?
Again, it's not, they're not being cured. They're required to continually run away from acknowledging their actual biological sex. The transitioning is like exacerbating the problem. If anything, it's making it easier to run away from facing one's discomfort or self-loathing as your sex.
And
Transition
I
makes
guess,
it easier to do
yeah,
that.
and this is where the argument of grown adults can do what they want. Okay? Because many adults continue to run from their problems. Many adults continue to use unhealthy coping mechanism in life. Some never stop, and some will say that they are much happier living this way than they would be the other way.
Right.
And they will die being happy with their alcoholism,
Right.
or their eating disorder, or their drug addiction, or their gambling addiction, or numerous other issues that they have. That doesn't mean that they were right. It doesn't mean that what they did was correct. It doesn't mean that what they did was healthy. But again, we generally don't force adults to seek treatment if they don't want to, like actual like mental health treatment to help, and again, they have to participate in that. But there's also repercussions for not, like, if you end up on the street because you're not maintaining your mental health,
Right.
like, I don't know. There's give and takes to being adults and doing adult things.
Adulting is not for the weak.
No, it is not. So that's my issue with the base idea that gatekeeping was good, or that it was better, or that blah, 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 blah. It's just like, if you actually go back and look at what these people were actually like, the criteria they had was homophobic, sexist. It was all of those things. It was
And not
still
backed
all of,
by actual
no,
conclusive science.
no. And I used to crack this joke on Twitter quite a lot before I left. I used to say, everybody knows the truest transsexual is always homosexual, because that it's true. Every time one of these fucking GCs or gender critical or whatever people would jump in, the always when they pointed out the real true transsexual, it was always a homosexual person. who transitioned. I'm like, well, isn't that funny? I wonder why that is.
Because they're still not comfortable with homosexuals just being their natural self.
Well, and they're also still buying into this idea that there is a certain behavior type
Right.
that is feminine or masculine, right?
That is
And
male
that
or
yeah.
right.
Well, okay, yeah, feminine and masculine can be separated from male and female, I guess, but the particular action or type that makes you means it's only females do this particular, only males do this particular thing, right?
Right. Right.
And it's like, well, that's bullshit, isn't it? Shouldn't we be challenging that? And I think that's a lot of the frustration that some of us who are coming at this from, I think, maybe a little bit more of a feminist angle get
Yeah.
when we get when we get in this conversation, because we're like, if you still hold up the base idea of transgender belief and or trans ideology, then you will never fix this problem. This will always exist because you're still upholding gender stereotypes, and gender stereotypes are the fucking homophobia is the fucking problem.
Yeah.
Misogyny is the fucking problem.
This
Oh,
topic
and the
is
other thing, the true transsexual, how do we know who's true and who's not? Or good transsexual that can use the women's spaces? Which one is the good transsexual that can use the women's spaces? You know, what male is the true transsexual, would never rape and would never beat, would never look at, would never sexually assault women and girls or women and children.
hashtag not all men. I mean, hashtag there are some nice men and they deserve to be in our changing rooms. What are you
There
talking?
is there is some good guys, because if there wasn't, we'd be in a real shithole. Obviously there's guys that don't do.
And you know what?
Duh.
Those good guys don't ever ask to come into women's spaces. Those good guys are like, oh, women have a club that's just for women. I won't go to that. I'll
Yeah.
tell my sister about it, but I won't go. Anytime a man is like, oh, here's a boundary that women have set up clearly, I'm gonna go in there anyway because I pass really well. I'm just like, that's predatory behavior, if you ask me. Like,
Mhm.
what are
Well,
you
and
doing?
you know what, it's weird too. The difference here, I find interesting is many a detransitioned woman will be very concerned about using the female spaces, because we're like, oh man, we don't want to like make women uncomfortable. We don't want the women to think like we care, like we care. Why do you think we care, but a dude who thinks he's a woman doesn't care? What do you think where's that difference landing? Oh, because we're women and we know what it's like to be fucking preyed upon, right? So we don't want to make other women feel that uncomfortableness.
Right.
But the dude didn't even occur to him. Why would he want to make women uncomfortable? Ask, why does he want to make people feel bad? We make him feel bad. Why does he want to make us feel bad? Everybody's feeling real bad here. So where are we going to figure this out?
You feel bad. I feel bad.
We
Okay.
all feel bad.
We've all established we're all miserable, but you don't get to come take a
But
shit in the toilet.
I mean, and that's, I know we've kind of side railed a little here, but like this also goes back to the lying part, right? This also goes back to the mandating that society participate in another person's delusion, another person's untruth. Untruth. We used to call that a lie, and I'm going to continue to call lies lies. And I think,
Words mean things.
yeah, and I also think that as a society, I thought we established that lying wasn't a good thing, right? Like, lying has never been an okay thing in any human society ever, and that's for a goddamn reason. Because when lying is pervasive, society will fucking fall apart. You cannot keep people together if there's no trust. Trust is hugely important to society. If you break down trust, shit gets real sideways real fast. And that's why sex segregated places exist, because you cannot trust a lot of male humans. Unfortunately, I don't know why. I don't know if it's social or biological, and I'm not here to figure that out. But what I do know is the FBI statistics show that 90%, if not higher, of all sexual assaults is done by males to females. So that's what we know on it. How do we decide which male is okay and which male is not okay? We cannot. That's why we just have that boundary.
Right. And I'm not going to force a man to use the man's bathroom if he does not feel safe using that. But that doesn't mean that you get to go to use the women's room. I will march with you to get a third space. That,
do you know what's funny is when I was trans identified, I actually wanted a third space.
yeah, I bet.
Like I wasn't comfortable. I didn't want to use the men's restroom. I wasn't comfortable with it, but I also didn't want to go use the women's restroom either. Like I always searched out for the like gender neutral bathrooms. And I don't mean the gender neutral bathrooms where you took the women's restroom and you turned it into the motherfucking gender neutral bathroom. I mean an actual third bathroom. Okay. They when it started in California, they were called family bathrooms. It it's one toilet, it's one room, right? You go, one person goes in there, or a family can go in there, like if you have kids. Um, I searched out those bathrooms. Okay,
yeah.
I always searched out the one stall single bathrooms to use because that was just more comfortable. And I even when I was in like trans, some of the like very early trans activist typey spaces I was in early on, I even asked the question, why aren't we pushing for third spaces? That would just make everybody more comfortable. And I was a fucking heretic.
Yeah.
So like if you were really concerned about your right to exist, but also being a decent fucking human and carrying other people's rights to like exist and be comfortable in society, you would be advocating for a third space. Um, not to push yourself in space to make other people uncomfortable. You're basically saying, I come first, you can fuck off.
And not
And
to
I'm
be
sorry, I don't
such a
agree with
good
that.
liar, not to be such a good liar that no one detects you because you're still lying. Like that's still wrong. Just because you didn't get caught doing something wrong doesn't mean that it wasn't wrong. You know, no harm, no foul. If people don't know that I'm really a woman or people don't know that I'm really a man and I just use this space, like what's the big deal? It's like, well, why is respecting someone's boundary a big deal? It is a big
No.
deal. It's called being a decent, it's called being equals, respecting, being kind, being nice, and I don't know, just valuing other people, like that.
Let's talk about the idea that trans and gay are basically the same thing.
Okay, yeah.
Because that's a major argument that's get through. You're saying the same stuff that they used to say about gay people, but you're saying about trans people.
Yeah. Okay.
And on the surface, they're correct. On the surface, it does seem similar. It does. But we're going to dig a little deeper. We're going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna try to be like some analogy, like, same melody, different notes. Or different note. Does that work with the anyway?
I'm not good at music, so I don't know.
Same notes, different melody, maybe? I don't know.
Well, give me your take on it.
Well, first of all, trans is something you actively do to yourself.
It's an
Gay is,
action.
it's an action.
Well, that depends if how you define it, though.
Okay, yeah. I was defining it as people who actively go to seek out medical transition, you know, being gay is, or being labeled a lesbian is something other people put on to me because they see me being romantic with a woman or with, like, and when I explain, like, yeah, the way I feel with women, I don't feel that way with men. Hell, if I haven't freaking tried. I loved that, by the way, side note, loved the podcast you talked about, the tolerating, how women can tolerate
Oh,
a lot. I was like, oh, I'm so
yeah.
but I don't know if homosexuality is innate or if it's a behavior that's, or a
A thing
nature,
that's developed in
a thing
childhood,
that's
maybe.
developed. Right. I don't know if sexual orientation, gay or straight or lesbian, is innate, that you're born with it and that's just how it's going to be, or if your sexual orientation gets developed through nature and nurture. And I don't know, and frankly I don't really care. I just know
Yeah.
that it's at the end of the day, this is I am happiest when I am loving on a woman. um and it doesn't require anyone else to participate. I don't want anyone else participating. It's a relationship between two people. It's a feeling that I have, it's an attraction that I have towards someone. um and it doesn't require it's not a medical condition that I'm not trying to cure. I don't need to take anything to make me feel this way. And trans is totally different. Trans is it's a medical, transitioning is a medical or cosmetic procedure that someone does to themselves, and then they have to maintain this facade for the rest of their life. And um yeah, I don't know.
I would say for me, the one big difference that I would say exists is that sexual attraction is an actual physical response that can be scientifically tested, measured, and proven. Like, sexual response is something we don't
fully.
really have any control over.
Okay, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Control as in the response itself. Now we have control with action that comes after the response, which, well, that's a side thing. But the sexual attraction, the sexual response is something that seems to me to be innate. Whether it is or not, who knows? Like you said, I don't care. Also, because it is that, you also, like you said, do not have to do anything to be gay. So for example, you are, that is your sexual response. I didn't have to go and seek out a therapist to write me a letter, to then go to a doctor who cut off parts of my body and gave me a synthetic hormone, a drug that would then shorten my life and give me lots of issues, medical issues, and make me a lifelong medical patient, to be gay. I just am gay, and I just exist that way. I also don't, as a lesbian, don't really mandate, like you said, people to participate in my life. Now, someone could push back on that argument, though, and say gays did mandate people participate when we wanted marriage equality, or when we wanted equality when we wanted to be able to be out as gay and teach children, or not teach children gay. It's okay, everybody, calm down.
Just
No, we're not
teaching
teaching.
now.
Saying I want the same goddamn rights as everybody else has under the law is not really making anybody participate in anything. All I'm saying is when I file taxes, I want to get the same tax breaks for me and my partner that I live with and love as everybody else does.
I want to be able to adopt a child with them. I want to be able
I want to
to.
be able to see my wife in the hospital.
Yeah.
I want to be able to make medical decisions for her, and she wants to make them for me, which we're old enough to have gone through that problem.
Yeah.
Um, that's a human right to me, though, and I would never deny anybody that right.
Right. And what's not a human right is forcing people to say things that they don't believe. And like I think about this woman who makes cakes, and she didn't want to bake a cake for this gay couple, lesbian, I don't know, lesbian or gay, and they sued her and she won. It was like, yeah, you
Oh,
don't
she
have
did?
to. She
Because
did.
I think there was one that got sued, and I think he lost.
Hmm.
But anyways, go.
Um, but and it wasn't, I don't want to bake a cake for you because you're gay. It was, I don't want to bake your wedding cake because I don't believe in same-sex marriage. And for me, I was like, okay, well, it's his business or her business. I don't want a homophobic person making my wedding cake. So,
Right? Fuck you. I'll go find someone else.
um, But again, that's pushing an acceptance. That's not saying, well, if you don't do this, we're no longer gay. So like,
Oh, that's a good point.
you got to make this cake. You got to validate that we are same sex getting married. It's just saying, okay, you're being an asshole. Make that cake.
That's true. Being gay does not mean that society doesn't have to agree and participate in the action of you being gay. Like, you are gay. You were gay on an island. You were gay in Russia where they'll fucking hang your ass. You're gay in Africa, African continent, and most of those countries where they'll fucking do the same. You know, that society can absolutely not participate in you still be gay.
Yeah. But being trans requires other people to participate, to validate, to call you opposite sex pronouns, to provide you hormones and surgeries, in order for you to accomplish the transition.
Oh,
Um,
of course, they will argue that trans is innate, like gay, and they can't change who they are.
well, I would say to that, why are you taking hormones then? If it like you know, I can believe that you are innately, your personality, you're innately feminine, innately masculine, whatever you want to call it. Like you behave a certain way, you feel a certain way. I don't In my day, we just called that having a dynamic personality. We didn't pathologize it by saying you're transgender. Um, so
And this is a good point, and this is also one of the things I really stress when I talk about this stuff is my issue with the whole transgender stuff is not the title. It's not even necessarily the individual person's belief about themselves. It's the medicalization, because
mm,
I am very against medicalizing people who don't need it, really, when it's not scientifically backed, and when the person has emotional and mental health issues that are likely causing their discomfort and they're being medicalized instead of actually addressing the issue. So, for example, if
cool.
if a bunch of people wanted to call themselves trans and they wanted to say with friends and family that they wanted to be looked at and identified as the opposite sex, but no medication, no demanding the medical field, no demanding state and government get participate, no mandating I participate, knock yourself out. Good for you. I'll support your right to do just that. No one should deny you housing because you say that. No one should deny you work. No one should deny you medical care. None of that, right?
Right.
But also, I, that's not what's happening. It's the medicalization, the part that's really troubling to me,
Mm.
because also this is involving kids. We're medicalizing kids now too, and that's, whoa. You're medicalizing, from my perspective, you're medicalizing mentally ill people and children. You're making money off the backs of mentally ill and children, just like, you know
And
they've been doing for years.
and for better or for worse, it doesn't matter if they like the outcome or not. Either way, they're a lifelong medical patient. Whether they
Yeah,
continue down the path of transition, they will always be taking measures of transitioning,
yeah.
or whether they stop and they want to detransition and they now have medical problems that they have to maintain. So it's like win-win for the big
And
pharma.
yeah.
Gender ideology often talks about gender identity.
Mm.
And I feel like there's kind of two more distinct schools of thought of people who really believe in a gender identity, and then people how it's kind of, I feel like it's falling a little out of vogue, where they're kind of talking about it less because they realize, oh, that's just a soul. We're just talking about, a sexed soul, and not everyone believes in that. So we need to go back to it being about dysphoria. But
Mm.
for a good time, even in today, I think a lot of the transsexual, it's about the gender identity is not the same as the biological sex. And it's like, again, with homosexuals, there's nothing wrong. It's just a physical reaction, like you said, that we can measure, a physical response that we have no control over. And of course, people don't have control over, what their preferences are for self expression. But I disagree with the pathologizing of that self-expression as being trans.
Exactly. Exactly.
A man's a man, no matter how he performs or exists. And we don't need to medicalize that. We don't need to pathologize it. We used to pathologize homosexuality and we stopped. And so now they're saying, well, we should get rid of all the gatekeeping for trans because we're pathologizing it like we did with homosexuals, and they should just be allowed to be given the hormones. It's like, you have to pathologize transitioning because
Because
it's the actual, you're fucking around with medical shit.
exactly.
It's not
You
the
cannot
same.
have it both ways. It cannot be a medical, what do they say? It's
Oh,
a
yeah.
life, it
Life
cannot be a
saving.
life-saving medical procedure and also not
Right.
not medical at all. Like you
Right.
cannot have it both ways. That doesn't work.
And homosexuals were like, yeah, no, it's not a medical thing. And they're like, okay, like, that's it. Can we get married now? Like, we don't, I'm not asking anything from anyone except to leave me alone and let me be in love with a woman.
All right, so this has been a great talk. We touched on quite a few things. We had a few tangents. I'll leave in some tangents because I think some tangents are okay, and I'm a tangent kind of gal. I hope this gives people something to think about, and I really want people to think about this, and I especially want lesbians to think about this. Like, we're both lesbians. We're both lesbians with a history in transgender spaces and transgender identification. We're both lesbians with have struggled with gender dysphoria. I think personally, I think we know what we're talking about. But I think with this, we went above and beyond just personal. We gave information, like we gave some and thought-provoking things to talk about, and even some resources. Like, I will link some stuff that like I talked about in here for people to go look it up themselves. And that's the thing, like, I really encourage people, go out and look at this stuff yourself. Don't just take my word for it.
Absolutely.
So
Oh,
thanks for talking with me.
this was very fun, and I look forward to doing it again sometime. I
Oh,
could
we're gonna
talk
do it
about
again. We're gonna do something else
college.
again.
Yeah, no, another topic,
Ooh.
something else. Think of
Okay,
another iceberg tip that we could just.
maybe you choose it. Actually, I have an idea. Maybe for the next one, we will hit on the whole, basically the whole transgender stuff as lesbians from lesbian perspective and what is done in our community, this belief system, what it has done to our spaces and our lives.
I love that.